Ever felt a strange weight in the room when everyone's smiling, but something inside you tightens, as if behind the praise, behind the congratulations, there's a whisper, "I hope you don't go too far." Envy and falsehood rarely arrive with warning signs. They slip in quietly through subtle tones, half-hearted applause, and perfectly timed comparisons. The ones who harm your peace the most are not always your enemies. They're often the ones closest to your joy, clapping just a little too softly. Stoicism teaches us to see the world not as it appears, but as it is, to look past the surface, past the charm, and into the patterns of behavior that reveal what words often conceal. In this video, we'll explore 10 Stoic insights that will sharpen your perception tools, not to judge others, but to protect the clarity and calm within you. If you're someone who values peace over pretense and truth over performance, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, ring the bell if you'd like, and when you're ready, leave a comment that simply says, "I choose clarity." Let's begin, because your intuition has been right all along. Number 1. Observe their actions. Let's talk about something that will sharpen your vision more than any advice about trust or loyalty ever could. Stop listening so closely to what people say and start watching what they do. In a world of curated impressions and calculated personas, where compliments are given as currency and smiles sometimes serve as camouflage, actions remain the only reliable compass. And in the eyes of a Stoic, that's where the truth lives, beneath the performance, beneath the polite laughter, beneath the flattering words that melt easily off the tongue. Stoicism teaches us a simple but piercing principle: judge nothing by appearance. Measure everything by behavior. Epictetus told us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In other words, don't be fooled by rhetoric. Observe the walk, not the talk. Anyone can say they're your friend. Anyone can say they wish you well. Anyone can tell you they respect you. But when the moment comes for them to act, to show up, to give without gain, what happens then? That is where envy often reveals itself. Not in direct confrontation, but in hesitation, in absence, in silence. The people who secretly envy you won't always sabotage you with open hostility. That's not how this kind of falsehood works. Instead, they stay just close enough to watch, just distant enough to never truly help. They'll cheer for you in public because they must, but when it really matters, when you need a favor, when you're overwhelmed, when the stage lights dim, they vanish. Or worse, they delay you with polite indifference. They avoid giving you that key introduction, or they forget to mention your name when credit is passed around. And the most dangerous part, you'll doubt your own instincts, because their words were always so right. Marcus Aurelius warned us, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. This isn't just a call for self-discipline, it's a mirror. If you want to understand others, observe yourself. When you say you care, do you show up when there's nothing in it for you? When you call someone a friend, do you help them succeed even when it costs you comfort? Because that is the only honest standard to judge others by, not promises, not potential, but proof. Take a simple example. Imagine you're working on a small personal project. Maybe you're launching a podcast or starting a fitness journey. You tell a close friend about it, not to impress them, but just to share what's meaningful to you. They nod, smile, say they're excited, but the next week, you notice something subtle. They change the subject when you bring it up. They avoid reposting it. They never ask how it's going. Eventually, when you're on the edge of giving up, they offer a backhanded remark. That kind of stuff never really takes off anyway. And there it is, envy in disguise, disguised as realism, disguised as concern, disguised as indifference. because deep down, your growth threatens their comfort. Your progress reminds them of their stagnation. Now imagine the opposite. A different friend listens with curiosity, checks in later, shares your project with others, maybe even offers you a tip or a tool they used in their own journey. And they do it without fanfare, no praise-seeking, just presence. That's not envy. That's integrity. That's what real support looks like. And most of the time, it speaks in quiet gestures. But here's the Stoic warning: don't become bitter. Clarity, yes. Judgment, no. The Stoic path isn't about labeling everyone who disappoints you as fake or toxic. That mindset only leads to isolation and paranoia. Instead, use their actions as information. Let their behavior teach you how much access to give, who earns your time, who deserves your energy, who should be loved from afar, and who has earned a seat at your inner circle. Aurelius also said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If we dye ourselves in suspicion, in anger, in retaliation, we carry the very disease we hope to avoid. So be deliberate, be calm, be observant, but stay free from unnecessary emotional entanglement. When someone shows you with consistency that their actions don't match their words, don't confront them in drama, adjust the boundary in silence. That's the Stoic way. Envy has a strange relationship with silence. Those who harbor it rarely express it outright. It's too risky. It would expose their own insecurity. So instead, they hide it beneath lukewarm applause. Stoicism arms us with the emotional precision to detect that, not so we can attack, but so we can protect. Because if you fail to recognize falsehood in others, it won't just hurt your feelings, it will erode your peace. The energy you spend wondering, replaying conversations, trying to make sense of someone's distance or coldness, that energy could be spent on building your own virtue, your own clarity, your own life. So how do you practice this? Start small. Don't just listen when someone talks about values. Watch them when pressure arrives. Don't just observe how they act in public. See how they respond when the crowd leaves. Do they keep their word when no one's watching? Do they speak well of others behind their back? Do they contribute when there's no reward? We live in a world that teaches us to say the right thing, brand ourselves the right way, present our lives in curated perfection. But as Stoics, we must resist the temptation to be fooled by appearances. Let the fruit of someone's actions speak for itself. Seneca once said, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." I'd take that further. A person's truth is no greater than the evidence in their actions. So let this be your first compass when navigating envy and deceit. Stop taking words as truth. Words can be rehearsed. Words can be manipulated. But patterns of behavior, that's where you find the reality. The person who says they believe in you, but vanishes every time you rise. That's not belief. That's discomfort cloaked in kindness. The friend who claims loyalty but never defends you when others criticize, that's not loyalty. That's performance. And the colleague who praises you in meetings but blocks you in decisions, that's not respect. That's strategic envy. But don't meet deception with vengeance. Meet it with distance. Don't meet envy with bitterness. Meet it with clarity. Don't call it out, call it off. Quietly. Because you don't owe anyone your trust. You offer it, and you observe. If they honor it with action, you continue. If they betray it in silence, you withdraw. And you do it not with resentment, but with peace. That is the Stoic's power, not to control others, but to control the terms on which they enter your life. Your peace is too sacred to gamble on charm, and your time is too precious to invest in people who want your light dimmed just enough so they feel less insecure. So remember this: in a world full of clever words and curated smiles, the one who quietly shows up, keeps their word, and stands by you when the applause fades, that's the one you can trust. Everyone else is just passing through. Watch for the pattern. Trust what you see, not what you're told. At the end of the day, behavior never lies. Number 2, evaluate their response to your success. There is a quiet truth about success that few dare to confront. The moment you begin to rise is the same moment you begin to see people more clearly. It's not during your struggle that envy becomes visible. It's during your triumph, when you're still grinding, still doubting, still quietly enduring. People feel safe around you. Your potential is abstract, not yet threatening. But the second your effort begins to bear fruit, when doors open, when recognition finds you, when your life starts to change, watch carefully, because in that glow of progress, some faces will light up with genuine joy, and others will darken with something far more unsettling: envy, resentment, silent discomfort masked behind lukewarm praise. And this is where Stoic philosophy becomes not just relevant, but vital. Stoicism doesn't teach us to crave applause. In fact, it warns us not to depend on it at all. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." He wasn't encouraging us to seek failure. He was reminding us that public perception is unreliable, and that applies doubly to success. The Stoic doesn't interpret silence or awkward glances as rejection or hostility. Instead, he sees them as information. When you succeed and the air shifts, when the laughter dims, the tone flattens, the eye contact fades, something is being revealed, not about you, but about them. Consider a simple example. Let's say you've just landed a big opportunity. Maybe you got accepted into a program you've been working toward for years, or your side project finally went viral, or your small business turned profitable. You share this news with your circle friends, co-workers, even family. The reactions vary. One friend texts back hours later with a dry, "Cool, congrats." Another quickly changes the subject, steering the conversation back to themselves. Someone else makes a veiled comment, "That must be nice." Some of us don't have that kind of luck. These are not just social slip-ups. These are signals. Contrast that with someone who immediately lights up with excitement, who shares your joy, who says, "You earned this. I'm proud of you." No awkwardness, no detour, just sincere happiness. That's the kind of presence Stoicism encourages us to notice and value, not because it strokes your ego, but because it signals depth of character. A person who celebrates your growth without feeling threatened has already conquered something within themselves. And those are the people you build with. Stoicism trains us to recognize this contrast, not emotionally, but philosophically. Marcus Aurelius didn't tell us to get angry at people who withdraw from our light. He told us to observe. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is especially important when you begin to outgrow the identity others have assigned to you. Your success might shatter the image they've held of you, the one that made them feel safe, superior, or needed. And when that image dissolves, their comfort does too. But here's the key. Your job is not to shrink yourself to preserve their comfort. Your job is not to dim your light to keep others from squinting. Your only job, as a Stoic, is to maintain clarity about who you are and who they are becoming in response to that. This isn't about arrogance, it's about alignment. A Stoic doesn't cut people off impulsively, but neither does he cling to what no longer serves the truth. When someone begins to meet your good news with cold indifference, you don't need to call it out. You simply adjust. You don't throw accusations. You shift your expectations. You don't announce your distance. You embody it. That's what Epictetus meant when he spoke of guarding your inner citadel. Your peace must be protected not by fences, but by discernment. Jealousy rarely shows up in grand gestures. It prefers subtlety. It speaks in backhanded compliments like, "That was fast. Are you sure you're ready for it?" It asks questions that poke at your foundation. Do you think you'll actually make it in that space? And if you're not grounded, if you don't understand that their discomfort is about them, not you, these words can burrow in and breed self-doubt. That's how envy weakens you, not by storming the gates, but by whispering through the cracks. And that's why Stoicism tells us to remain vigilant. Seneca wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." One of the hardest lessons is learning how to live while rising. Not everyone who started with you can go where you're going. Some relationships were built on struggle, not strength. And when the struggle ends, so does the bond. That's painful, but it's real. The Stoic doesn't mourn it with bitterness. He honors the role those people played and then lets the season change. You are not abandoning them. You are allowing them the freedom to stay as they are while you continue forward. And there's another layer here. Sometimes, the envy you'll face isn't even malicious. It's unconscious. People won't admit to feeling threatened, even to themselves. They might genuinely want to be happy for you, but feel a sting they can't explain, and so they pull away. That's human. But again, your responsibility isn't to fix their inner world. It's to manage your own. What should you do, then, when your success becomes uncomfortable for others? You don't apologize for it. You don't flaunt it either. You wear it quietly, like a well-earned cloak. You let your progress speak for itself, and you pay attention. Who asks questions with curiosity, and who asks with subtle competition? Who shares your news with others, and who downplays it? Who checks in later, not just in celebration, but in support? A Stoic builds his circle not from habit, but from harmony. Those who cannot be happy for you now will not be safe for you later. That's not cruelty, it's reality. And as Aurelius taught, reality is not your enemy, it's your instructor. In the end, success is a mirror. It doesn't just reflect who you've become. It reveals the people around you. Those who are ready will rise with you. Those who are not will resist. But none of this should alter your course. As the Stoics remind us again and again, external responses are not within your control. Your reaction to them is. So keep walking, keep growing, keep succeeding, not to prove anything, but because it's the path of your nature. And as you do, let the reactions teach you. Let them show you where trust is wise and where distance is necessary. Success, then, is more than a milestone. It is a sieve. It filters the loyal from the envious, the supportive from the performative, the grounded from the fragile. And through that filter, your circle will refine itself. Not because you fought for it, but because you observed with wisdom. So remember this, every victory you achieve is not just a step forward, it's also a spotlight. And in that light, the real faces will appear. Let your life be proof. Let your peace be the standard. And let your company reflect your clarity, not their envy. Number 3, notice how they treat people beneath them. If you want to uncover the truth about someone's character, don't look at how they treat the powerful. Look at how they treat the powerless. This single lens, rooted deeply in Stoic wisdom, exposes what status, reputation, and polished words often conceal, because the way someone behaves toward those who have nothing to offer in return, no influence, no leverage, no means to reward or punish, tells you everything you need to know about who they are beneath the mask. The Stoics understood that status is an illusion, a shifting shadow that distracts us from what really matters, virtue. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire, yet he reminded himself daily that emperors and beggars return to the same earth. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men of his time, spoke passionately about humility, writing, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." These men weren't obsessed with social rank, they were obsessed with the soul, and so must we be, if we seek to live wisely and avoid being deceived. In modern life, we often overlook this principle. We judge people by how they network at events, how charming they are to executives, how eloquently they present their ideas. But these are staged performances. The real test comes in unscripted moments when no one's watching, when there's nothing to gain. That's when envy and deceit, which often wear the disguise of courtesy and charisma, begin to slip. I remember a small encounter that changed the way I viewed someone forever. At a leadership retreat, I watched a senior executive laugh and toast with the company's board during dinner, engaging in conversation like a seasoned diplomat. Minutes later, in the hallway, a hotel employee passed by with a heavy tray. The executive, still holding a drink, stood in the way and didn't even move or acknowledge them. Not a nod, not a glance, just a cold indifference. That single moment shattered the illusion of integrity. Here was someone who knew how to perform in front of power, but failed where it mattered most, in the presence of someone who couldn't elevate them. That wasn't leadership. That was ego. Envious and false-hearted people often follow the same pattern. They're selectively kind. Their generosity is strategic. Their compliments are calculated. They shine when the spotlight is on, but dim when no one of importance is watching. And if you pay close attention, you'll catch it. The smile that fades once a superior walks away, the subtle impatience with a waiter, the failure to say thank you to a janitor. These are not small details. These are clues about what they value, about how they define human worth. But Stoicism doesn't stop at observation. It demands introspection, as Epictetus taught. Philosophy is not about pointing fingers, it's about checking your own soul first. So we must ask ourselves, how do we behave when there is nothing to gain? Do we greet the security guard with the same sincerity we offer the CEO? Do we hold the door for the delivery worker with the same ease as we do for a close friend? Do we speak to those who serve us with patience and presence? Or do we see them only as background to our own agenda? If our answer to these questions is uncertain, that's not cause for shame. It's a call to grow, because the Stoic way isn't perfection. It's consistency. It's choosing, day after day, to live in harmony with what we claim to believe. If we say we value dignity, we must show it, even when the world tells us we don't have to. Especially then, there's also a social cost to ignoring this lesson. When you keep people close, who only show respect to the influential, you surround yourself with insecurity, masked as ambition. These people are not allies, they are opportunists. And when the tides turn, when your influence wanes, or your circumstances change, they will vanish. That's the nature of false loyalty. It clings to you when you're rising, but leaves you when you fall. And Stoicism urges us to protect ourselves from this by observing not their words, but their hierarchy of kindness. So how can you recognize this subtle form of envy and duplicity? Pay attention to inconsistencies. Does their kindness disappear when they speak to someone they believe can't offer them a return? Do they mock or ignore those who work in silence? Are they quick to flatter the successful but slow to show patience with the struggling? These are not just quirks. These are ethical red flags, and there's something even deeper at play. Those who treat the powerless poorly often fear power in others. Their envy drives them to prove, again and again, that they are superior, even if only to a service worker or assistant. But a truly secure soul has nothing to prove. They don't need to dominate interactions or assert status. Their dignity is internal, and that's the kind of person you can trust, the kind who sees worth not in what someone owns or can provide, but simply in who they are. Stoicism invites us to become that person too, to live in a way that doesn't shift with the room we're in, to bring the same presence and respect to every interaction, regardless of how visible or rewarding it is, to say, through our actions, that character isn't performative, it's foundational in your life. Begin to observe the small moments. Watch how your friends treat waitstaff, how your colleagues address interns, how your mentors speak about those below them. These moments are not beneath your notice. They are the doorway to deeper truth. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But don't let what you see harden you. Let it guide you. Let it remind you that while others chase influence, you are building integrity. While others measure people by power, you are measuring them by presence. And while others flatter up and dismiss down, you're learning to stand firm in kindness, in clarity, in character, because in the end, no one is truly beneath you. That's an illusion created by ego. What's real is shared humanity. What's lasting is how we make others feel when we have no reason to impress. That's where legacy lives, not in applause, but in the quiet respect of those who had nothing to give, yet still remember your kindness. So let this be your standard treat everyone with the same dignity you would offer a king, not because of who they are, but because of who you are. That is the Stoic way. That is the foundation of a life, not just of wisdom, but of worth. Shadows fall, titles fade, power shifts, but character that stays. And it's carved not in grand speeches, but in small, ordinary moments when you think no one is watching, but someone always is. And more importantly, you are. Number 4. Distinguish. Praise from flattery. One of the most deceptive threats to your clarity and peace doesn't come dressed in cruelty. It arrives cloaked in praise. Not the honest kind that recognizes effort, but the excessive, honey-drenched words that feel good to hear, yet carry a hidden agenda. This is where envy and falsehood wear their most convincing disguise. Stoic philosophy warns us, just because something feels pleasant doesn't mean it's virtuous. Flattery, when weaponized, is not a gift, it's a sedative. It dulls your critical thinking. It lulls you into a state of emotional comfort, and if you're not paying attention, it will rob you of your judgment and possibly your future. The Stoics spoke often about the danger of external validation. Seneca cautioned, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable, but a mind too eager for praise is already half conquered." The difference between a compliment and flattery lies not in the tone, but in the intent. A genuine compliment uplifts you without compromising your awareness. It affirms what you've earned, often from someone who has nothing to gain. Flattery, on the other hand, is a transaction dressed as a gift. It often comes from those who want access, power, or cover, and it's usually overdone, out of place, or too frequent to be sincere. Let me share a personal example that crystallized this lesson. Years ago, I was partnering on a major consulting deal with someone I'll call Rick. He was introduced through mutual acquaintances, smart, well-spoken, and almost unnervingly generous with compliments. Every meeting, Rick would begin with some kind of praise. "You're the reason this whole operation even runs," or "I've never seen anyone handle high-stress clients like you do. It's almost unreal." At first, I brushed it off as charm, but after years of working in silence without acknowledgement, I'll admit I let my guard down. His words filled a gap I didn't realize had been growing. I began trusting him more, giving him the benefit of the doubt, inviting him deeper into decisions I used to make alone. What I didn't see because I wasn't looking was how the praise was working. While I was basking in affirmation, Rick was shifting responsibilities onto me, subtly stepping back from the work, positioning himself in client conversations as the face of the strategy while I was buried in execution. Worst of all, he was quietly negotiating control of our most important deal, one we had built together. When it all came to light, I didn't just feel betrayed, I felt foolish. Not because I didn't see it, but because I chose not to. The signs were their vague responses to key questions, unkept promises, a lot of talking but very little doing. And I, someone who had studied Stoicism for years, had failed the test I warned others about. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone is able to prove me wrong, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth," which never harmed anyone. That quote echoed in my head during the fallout, not because someone had proved me wrong, but because I had refused to seek the truth when it was right in front of me. The flattery felt good. It fed something inside me that I hadn't examined, and that made me blind. Here's the reality: opportunists don't always look like threats. Sometimes they're the ones clapping the loudest, praising your talents, calling you irreplaceable, not because they believe it, but because they want you relaxed, distracted, and dependent on their words. When someone flatters you constantly, excessively, without evidence or balance, pause. Ask yourself, are they offering encouragement, or are they hiding a knife in the folds of their praise? Stoic wisdom teaches us not to reject kindness, but to verify it. Not to distrust everyone, but to remain awake. Your peace depends on your ability to stay grounded, especially when your ego is tempted to float. When you're being praised, watch what the person does, not what they say. Do they show up when you're struggling? Do they speak highly of you, even when you're not in the room? Do they take accountability? Or do they disappear when real work begins? These answers are more valuable than applause. Let's go deeper. Why do we fall for flattery in the first place? Often, it's because we're starved for acknowledgement. We work hard, we endure silently, and when someone finally notices, even if their attention is too sweet, too smooth, it feels like a reward. But Stoicism teaches us that inner validation must be our anchor. If your worth depends on others recognizing it, you're vulnerable to manipulation. Envy can come wrapped in admiration. Falsehood can come with a smile. And if you rely too heavily on the external to define your internal, you'll be led not by reason, but by emotion. In practical terms, this means learning to balance your pride with perspective. When someone praises you, appreciate it, but don't inflate it. Let it land, but don't let it steer. When someone flatters you constantly, ask what they might want. Don't accuse, but do observe. Over time, those who are sincere will prove it through consistency, humility, and mutual respect. Those who aren't will eventually reveal cracks, disproportionate self-interest, avoidance of responsibility, or sudden withdrawal when you no longer serve their goals. This awareness doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you precise. Stoic philosophy isn't about doubting everyone, it's about developing the discernment to see through the words, not just hear them. Because when the applause fades, and it always does, you'll want to be left with something real. And real connection, real loyalty, real support. Those don't need to be shouted. They're lived, quietly, consistently, without performance. So let this be your compass when someone praises you. Observe whether their actions elevate you or merely entertain you, whether their presence brings substance or just noise. Be grateful for every kind word, but remain anchored in your own judgment. Because in a world where falsehood often comes sweetened, your strength lies in your ability to recognize when sugar is just covering poison. Kindness is a virtue. Flattery is a tactic. Learn to know the difference, and you'll protect not only your reputation, but your peace. Number 5. Monitor their consistency. In a world that values charisma over character, it's tempting to place our trust in the loudest voice, the most articulate speaker, or the one who seems to say all the right things. But Stoic philosophy, with its deep roots in rational observation and moral discipline, offers a different standard, one far more revealing and far less deceptive consistency. Not perfection, not brilliance, but the quiet, steady alignment between a person's words and their actions, especially when no one is watching, especially when it costs them something. That is where the truth lives. Modern behavioral psychology confirms what the Stoics taught. Centuries ago, we tend to trust people who behave predictably, who remain anchored to their values even when the environment shifts. Consistency breeds trust, not because it's flashy, but because it signals self-mastery. And self-mastery is the foundation of virtue. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone." This is the voice of a man rooted in reason, willing to evolve, but never willing to betray his values for convenience. Now contrast that with those driven by envy, opportunism, or deceit. They don't change to grow, they change to gain. They bend principles depending on who's present. They wear conviction like a costume, one they can remove the moment it's no longer useful. And that shape-shifting, while often subtle, is where falsehood begins. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through shifting tones, selective loyalties, and disappearing ethics. Let me give you a personal example that clarified this truth for me. Years ago, I worked with someone I'll call David. In team meetings, David was the loudest advocate for fairness, constantly using words like teamwork, support, and shared success. On the surface, he seemed deeply principled, but that facade began to crack the day a high-profile client came into the picture. Suddenly, David wasn't interested in collaboration. He was angling for control. Conversations that once involved the group were now held in secret. Decisions were made behind closed doors. Credit for group achievements was quietly redirected toward his own image. At first, I rationalized it. Maybe the pressure was getting to him. Maybe he was just being strategic. But as the weeks unfolded, a pattern emerged the closer we got to reward or recognition. The more David's values morphed. His slogans about fairness vanished. His actions contradicted every ideal he once claimed to hold. And here's the part that stung the most. It wasn't dramatic. It was gradual. A slow erosion of integrity that, once noticed, couldn't be unseen. That shift ended our working relationship, but more importantly, it sharpened my lens for the future. This is the quiet brilliance of Stoicism. It doesn't teach you to expect perfection from others, but it teaches you to observe their pattern. When someone's ethics hold firm under pressure, when they act the same in private as they do in public, when they speak kindly to everyone regardless of status, they are showing you their essence, not once, but over time. Because that's how trust is earned, not in moments of spotlight, but in the patterns we weave through our behavior. On the other hand, when someone's tone shifts with the audience, when they disappear in difficulty but reappear in success, when their support is conditional and their presence is strategic. That's not loyalty, that's self-interest. And if you're not paying attention, you'll confuse charm for character. You'll trust someone's stated values, while their lived values quietly contradict them. So how do you protect yourself? You become a student of patterns. You stop relying on promises and start recording consistencies. You don't accuse, you observe. When someone says they value respect, ask, do they offer it when dealing with someone beneath their station? When someone preaches loyalty, ask, do they defend you in rooms where you're not present? When they claim to act with integrity, ask, do they still do the right thing when no one is watching and nothing is to be gained? The Stoic doesn't rush to judge, but he also doesn't ignore what is plainly in front of him. We're taught to cultivate stillness so we can notice the subtle inconsistencies others miss, the quiet betrayals, the invisible shifts in tone or stance, the way someone's values bend just slightly under pressure, like a reed in the wind. Because those shifts, though small, point to a deeper instability, a lack of centeredness, a hollow virtue. And here's the irony: people who are inconsistent often accuse others of being too rigid or too serious. They'll try to rationalize their behavior as flexible or adaptive. But Stoicism reminds us that moral flexibility isn't a virtue, it's a vulnerability. If your values collapse the moment you feel discomfort, they weren't values to begin with. They were strategies, and we're not immune to this ourselves. Stoicism isn't just about spotting falsehood in others, it's about confronting it within. Ask yourself, do I hold the same standards in solitude as I do in public? Do I speak with honesty when it's inconvenient? Do I remain kind when I'm frustrated? The more you practice this internal consistency, the easier it becomes to recognize it, or the lack of it, in those around you. This practice doesn't mean you become cold or cynical. It means you become clear. You learn to separate the genuine from the performative, and that clarity becomes a shield. It allows you to place trust not in charm, but in character, not in words, but in the steady beat of integrity, repeated over time. And over time, you'll begin to notice just how rare consistency is in a world full of shifting personas and situational ethics. Those who remain anchored to their principles stand out not through volume, but through presence. Their words match their actions. Their respect is constant. Their values don't collapse under pressure. And that, more than any title, any speech, or any applause, is what makes them trustworthy. So let this be your reminder when you want to know who someone truly is. Stop listening for what they say. Start watching for what they repeat. The good, the difficult, the inconvenient. Because while anyone can rise to a moment, only the sincere rise consistently. In the end, Stoicism doesn't offer you a formula for judgment. It offers you a framework for observation, quiet, steady, unclouded by emotion or assumption. And when you use it well, you'll rarely be surprised, because people always show you who they are. You just have to stay grounded enough to see it. Number 6. Observe their reaction to criticism. If you want to see someone's true character, strip away the applause, remove the compliments, step back from the praise. Instead, give them feedback, offer a gentle correction, or simply disagree with them. What comes next will tell you far more about who they are than any curated performance ever could. Because as Stoicism teaches, pressure doesn't create the cracks, it reveals where they already were. And nowhere is this more evident than in a person's reaction to criticism. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome and philosopher of immense restraint, once wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone. These words don't just reflect his humility, they represent the highest form of Stoic integrity, the ability to prioritize truth over ego, growth over pride, correction over comfort. But for most people, especially those whose identities are built on appearances, envy, or insecurity, criticism feels like an attack, not an invitation to improve. And this is exactly where falsehood hides in plain sight. Let's be honest, most people don't handle criticism well, especially those who secretly harbor jealousy or resentment. Their outward charm can vanish in an instant. Instead of reflecting, they deflect. Instead of thanking you for your perspective, they question your motives. They might laugh off your comment while tightening their guard. They'll blame the circumstances, shift attention, or subtly discredit your insight. Why? Because the correction pierces something fragile within them, the illusion of control, of perfection, of superiority, and illusions, once threatened, often fight back. I once worked with someone we'll call Maya Sharp, confident and widely respected in our industry. On the surface, she seemed grounded, but one day, during a brainstorming session, I suggested a small change to an idea she presented. I did it with tact, offering a few alternative angles and referencing past data. The room went quiet, and so did she. Then, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she nodded and said, "Noted." But from that moment on, her tone toward me changed. The warmth faded. She became distant, occasionally passive-aggressive, and when future decisions were made, I was slowly excluded. The feedback wasn't harsh, it wasn't personal, but to someone deeply attached to being seen as the smartest in the room, it was intolerable. That experience taught me someone's ability to accept criticism, especially in public, will show you more about their stability and sincerity than a year's worth of polite conversations ever could. The Stoic doesn't look for perfect people. Instead, he looks for signs of alignment between humility and strength, between values and behavior. A grounded person, when faced with constructive feedback, pauses. They breathe. They listen. Even if it stings, they may disagree, but they don't erupt. Why? Because their identity isn't built solely on being right. It's built on becoming better. And to improve, one must be correctable. In contrast, those ruled by ego or insecurity can't afford to be corrected. To them, criticism feels like exposure, like being unmasked, and so they respond with sarcasm, defensiveness, or icy withdrawal. These reactions may seem subtle, but they are deeply revealing. They indicate a person who is not seeking truth, but control, not connection, but protection. And often, this is where the seed of envy grows. Because if your success or insight threatens their image, they will see you not as a partner but as a problem. So how do you spot this in practice? Pay close attention in the small moments. When someone is told you might want to rethink this, do they lean in or recoil when a peer gently offers a better approach? Do they say, "Thank you for that," or, "Well, that's just your opinion"? Do they respond with curiosity or with subtle retaliation? These signals tell you who is secure enough to evolve and who is too afraid to admit they don't know everything. But Stoicism doesn't just turn the lens outward, it turns it inward too. So you must also ask, how do you respond to criticism when someone corrects your work or challenges your assumptions? Do you get tense, defensive? Do you shut down, deflect, or reframe it as a personal slight? Or do you breathe, consider their words, and ask, Is there truth in this, even if it's uncomfortable? Because growth isn't just about discovering others' faults. It's about confronting your own illusions, your own emotional reflexes. And few things expose those faster than being told. You could do this better. One of the most dangerous traps in life is surrounding yourself with people who only tell you what you want to hear. And one of the clearest red flags in others is their inability to receive anything they don't want to hear. The Stoic path rejects both. It seeks clarity, not comfort. And clarity often begins with a hard truth offered at the right moment. Aurelius didn't say truth is always easy. He said it never harmed anyone. What harms us is pride, the need to always be right, the refusal to accept that we might be mistaken. And in this refusal, envy often festers, because when someone can't improve themselves, they begin resenting those who do. If you're building your life with people who can't take honest feedback, be careful. When the time comes that you need to have a hard conversation about business, about boundaries, about values, they'll resist, avoid, or even retaliate. And if they can't handle correction, they can't handle connection either, not real connection. Anyway, because real connection requires the courage to be seen, not just in strength, but in imperfection. So watch closely. The next time someone is corrected, don't just listen to their words. Observe their energy, their face, their response in the days that follow. It will show you whether they're here to evolve or simply to be admired. It will show you whether their kindness is rooted in humility or in performance. And as you do this, remember your power doesn't come from correcting others. It comes from your own response, your willingness to grow, to ask hard questions, to sit with uncomfortable truths. Because when you're open to correction, you become nearly invincible. There's nothing left for envy to cling to, no illusion to defend, just truth. And truth, when met with a calm, rational, and grounded mind, is never something to fear. Let your strength be shown, not in how much praise you collect, but in how deeply you reflect. Let your resilience show, not in how few mistakes you make, but in how quickly you own and correct them. And let your wisdom shine through in how you handle those moments when someone challenges your view, not with ego, but with grace. Because in the end, the Stoic doesn't chase validation. He pursues virtue, and virtue, like truth, is often uncomfortable but always liberating. Number 7. Notice unintentional comparisons. One of the most common disguises envy wears is the mask of casual comparison. It's subtle, familiar, and often delivered with a smile, but don't be fooled. It rarely enters the room alone. Tucked behind those seemingly innocent remarks is a deeper current of discomfort, one that reveals far more about the speaker than it does about you. And this, the Stoics teach us, is precisely where falsehood often hides, not in direct conflict, but in quiet, almost forgettable comments that land a little too sharply to be harmless. You've probably heard it before. You mention a recent success, maybe something you're proud of, a promotion, a creative milestone, even a personal breakthrough, and someone responds not with congratulations, but with comparison. That's great. They say, but have you seen what Alex has done lately? Or, you should check out what Sarah's doing. It's kind of on another level. These statements aren't framed as insults. In fact, they often come veiled in admiration, but you feel it, that slight sting, that subtle pull, as if your moment of joy has been reclassified, downgraded from accomplishment to trivia. This isn't encouragement, it's erosion. It's envy, cleverly cloaked. Stoicism gives us the framework to understand why this hurts and how to rise above it. Epictetus reminds us that we must learn to distinguish between what is ours and what is not ours. Our thoughts, our actions, our principles, those are ours. Other people's opinions, emotions, and insecurities, those belong to them. When someone habitually compares you to others, they're not reflecting your worth, they're exposing their unrest. What seems like a passing comment is often a defense mechanism, a way to shield their fragile ego by subtly dragging you back down to their comfort zone. And it's rarely about the other person being mentioned. It's about their inability to sit with your growth without seeing it as a threat. I recall a conversation years ago with an old friend, someone I hadn't seen in a while. I had just completed a personal goal I'd been working toward for months, a book manuscript that had taken every ounce of discipline and clarity I had. When I shared the news, he smiled, nodded, then casually said, "That's cool. You know Tom just signed with a major publisher, right? Got a huge advance." The words were soft, but the message was clear. Don't get too comfortable in your achievement. Someone else is doing it bigger, better, faster. I remember walking away from that interaction not angry, but heavy, not because I doubted myself, but because I saw, in that moment, how comparison can be used not to inspire, but to subtly suppress. And here's the deeper danger if you're not grounded. These comparisons begin to seed doubt. Slowly, quietly, they chip away at your self-trust. You start questioning your pace, your process, your worth. You wonder if you're actually doing enough even when you've been diligent, present, and honest with your path. That is the theft envy commits, not just of credit, but of peace. And that's why Stoic clarity is so essential. It teaches us not just to spot envy in others, but to refuse its influence in ourselves. The Stoic doesn't live to outperform others, he lives to master himself. And so, when confronted with comparison, his response is not defense, not retaliation, but indifference, not coldness, but calm detachment. Because what others say about you, especially when rooted in their own insecurity, has no power unless you let it take root. The opinions of those wrestling with unhealed envy are not worth the rent they demand in your mind. Marcus Aurelius said, "It is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." When someone compares you to others, you have a choice. You can internalize it, turn it into self-doubt, let it rewrite your narrative. Or you can see it clearly for what it is, noise, a projection, a misalignment between their inner state and your success. And once you see it for what it is, you're free. But this awareness also asks you to reflect inward. Do you ever compare others unnecessarily? Do you downplay someone else's joy because it reflects your own sense of stagnation? This isn't about shame, it's about sharpening your integrity. Because the more peace you build within, the less you'll feel the urge to draw comparisons without. Genuine people don't play the comparison game. They don't need to. When someone they care about wins, they celebrate, not calculate. They don't pit people against each other. They honor the journey. They understand that success isn't a competition. There's no scoreboard for inner peace. And that's the kind of presence you must cultivate, not just to protect yourself from others, but to ensure you don't become the very thing you're trying to guard against. Here's a practice the next time someone makes a subtle comparison. Pause. Don't react. Don't explain. Don't feel the need to prove yourself. Just breathe, observe, and stay grounded. Let their words pass through you like wind through a tree. That's not arrogance, it's sovereignty. You are no longer living to meet other people's comfort thresholds. You are living to stay aligned with your truth. And one more thing, don't let the envy of others convince you to shrink. That's how it wins. That's how it spreads. When you downplay your light to make others comfortable, you betray not just your progress, but your potential. The Stoic path doesn't demand that you hide your excellence. It asks that you remain unmoved by the praise or the criticism it brings. You don't need to broadcast your success, but you also don't need to apologize for it. Walk your path with quiet pride and calm certainty. Let others sort out their own reactions, because in the end, what matters isn't who's ahead or behind. What matters is whether your life is moving in alignment with your principles. That's the only real measure. And those who understand this will never compare, they'll only encourage. Let this be your compass if someone constantly turns your joy into a measuring stick. They are not seeing you, they are projecting their own fear. But if someone celebrates your wins without needing to insert someone else's name into the conversation, you've found something rare, a heart secure enough to honor others without losing itself. And that, more than anything, is the kind of presence you deserve to keep close. Number 8. Pay attention to how they handle failure. It's been said that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. And while the origin of this quote is often debated, its truth echoes across time, perfectly aligned with the heart of Stoic philosophy. When life unravels, when the mask of competence is tested by failure, when comfort gives way to consequence, that is when people stop performing and start showing you who they truly are. Not the carefully polished version, not the curated persona they wear in good times, but the real self, the one that emerges when things go wrong. The Stoics understood this intimately. They didn't fear failure, they welcomed it as a necessary forge. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." In other words, our most revealing moments aren't when we're winning, they're when we're stumbling, because anyone can seem wise when the sun is shining. But how someone handles darkness, that's the truest test of their depth. I once worked with a man, let's call him Ryan, who seemed to have everything under control. He was articulate, charismatic, confident in all the ways that impress a room. People trusted him instinctively. He spoke in measured tones, carried himself like a leader, and never missed an opportunity to offer advice. But that image began to crack when a critical project won under his direct leadership completely collapsed. A missed deadline here, a miscalculation there, and before long the entire team was scrambling to contain the fallout. What stood out wasn't the failure itself, it was how Ryan responded. Instead of gathering the team to debrief and take responsibility, he began distancing himself. In meetings, he subtly redirected blame to junior staff. He reframed timelines to fit a narrative where he had warned us privately, of course, that something like this might happen. He positioned himself not as the one who dropped the ball, but as the misunderstood visionary who'd been let down by others. The shift wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. And just like that, the man who once preached accountability became the man rewriting history. That experience taught me something Stoicism had always hinted at. Failure doesn't turn people into something new. It unmasks who they were all along. It strips away the polish, the performance, the ego armor. What's left is the truth. And that truth can be humbling or horrifying. Compare that with someone who faces failure and owns it. Maybe not instantly, maybe not without emotion, but eventually, honestly, and without defensiveness. These are the people who say, "I missed it. I should have seen that. I'll do better next time." They don't point fingers. They don't vanish from the conversation. They lean in, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to grow. That kind of response earns a different kind of respect. Not the loud kind, the quiet, steady kind. The kind that says, this person is real, this person is stable. The Stoics would call this inner fortitude, the strength to stay steady in the face of loss, the humility to learn from it, and the discipline to move forward without complaint or denial. Marcus Aurelius didn't sugarcoat hardship. He called it what it was necessary, just as nature takes every obstacle, every impediment, and works around it, so too can a rational mind turn each obstacle into fuel for the fire of progress. But only if you're willing to confront it directly. People driven by insecurity or envy can't do that. They can't accept failure without also feeling exposed. To them, failure isn't a lesson, it's a threat. And so they scramble to protect their image, even if it means sacrificing truth. They craft narratives. They blame the tools, the timing, the team. They become the victim, or worse, the silent saboteur of the people who are trying to repair what they broke. That reaction isn't resilience, it's fragility in disguise, and it's one of the clearest red flags of a person whose character is built more on ego than on integrity. So how do you recognize this in your own life? Watch how people respond when things fall apart, not just for you, but for themselves. Do they take ownership? Or do they disappear into excuses? Do they acknowledge the consequences of their actions? Or do they pretend nothing happened, and when they fail, do they come back stronger, wiser, more transparent, or do they come back colder, more guarded, more rehearsed? These aren't just personality quirks, they're moral indicators. They show you whether someone can handle truth or only illusions. And if someone cannot sit in the discomfort of their own mistake, if they cannot admit fault without collapsing, they are not yet equipped for the kind of relationship, personal or professional, that requires honesty. But again, Stoicism doesn't ask us to judge from a distance. It asks us to look inward, too. How do you respond to failure? When something you led goes wrong, do you reflect or deflect? Do you reach out or shut down? Do you admit what happened? Or do you quietly rewrite the story to soften the sting? There's no shame in being disappointed by failure, but there is danger in refusing to learn from it. That refusal is the soil where envy grows, because instead of growing through failure, people begin resenting those who do. And that resentment often turns into subtle sabotage. The person who couldn't handle their own downfall becomes the person waiting for yours. That's why it's so important to watch reactions under pressure, to observe not with cynicism, but with clarity, because someone's failure doesn't make them a bad person. But how they respond to it will show you everything you need to know about their values, about their stability, about whether they're the kind of person who can walk with you when the road gets hard, or the kind who will quietly trip you to make their own fall look softer. And finally, remember, failure is part of life. For all of us, what sets the Stoic apart isn't avoidance of mistakes. It's the courage to face them, to say, yes, I failed and I'll use this. That mindset is rare, but it is the cornerstone of all great character. So let this be your reminder, in yourself and in others. Pay attention to the moments when things don't go according to plan. That's where the illusion breaks. That's where envy gets loud. But it's also where strength, humility, and truth reveal themselves, if they exist at all. Number 9. Evaluate how they speak about themselves and others. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." In one sentence, he captured a profound Stoic truth: what we think, what we dwell on, and what we choose to voice eventually shapes who we are. And if you want to know a person, truly know them, don't just study their actions. Listen to their words. Pay attention to the way they speak about themselves, their past, their failures, and especially how they speak about others. Language isn't just communication, it's revelation. It unveils the contents of the soul. We live in a world where people curate their image relentlessly. But despite the polish, the truth still leaks out in tone, in word choice, in what they choose to highlight or hide. And when it comes to recognizing envy and falsehood in others, one of the most telling indicators is how someone shares personal information, because what people say about themselves and how they say it offers a window into their inner world. Let's begin with the sincere. A grounded person, someone aligned with Stoic principles, doesn't feel the need to inflate their story. They don't narrate their lives like heroes in an epic tale. They speak with humility, with self-awareness, and often with a gentle honesty about their own shortcomings. When they talk about success, it's not to impress, it's to express. There's a clarity in their tone, a kind of calm that comes from not needing to prove anything. They've made peace with their path. Even when they speak about achievements, they balance it with lessons learned, obstacles faced, or gratitude for the people who helped along the way. There's no hunger for applause, just a quiet satisfaction in truth. I once worked with a woman named Elise. She was, by every measure, successful. But what struck me was the way she spoke. In meetings, she'd often reference mistakes she'd made early in her career, not to laugh at herself or win points for humility, but to illustrate growth. When complimented, she'd acknowledge it with grace, but redirect the attention to the team or the process. And when asked about future goals, she'd answer without bravado, often saying, "I'm still learning." That phrase stayed with me. It wasn't a performance. It was proof that she saw life not as a competition, but as a continuous unfolding. People like Elise are rare not because they're perfect, but because they don't pretend to be. Their speech is grounded, and that grounding is contagious. Now contrast that with the insecure, with the envious. These are the individuals who speak not to connect, but to impress. They exaggerate their accomplishments, subtly inflate their role in every story, and make sure their voice is heard, often loudly, often first. But the most telling clue isn't in how they speak about their wins. It's how they handle their losses, or rather, how they avoid them. When they mention failure, it's always someone else's fault. The team dropped the ball. The market turned unexpectedly. Their vision was misunderstood. Their language is full of evasion, of deflection, of carefully crafted stories where they're always either the unappreciated genius or the victim of others' incompetence. This isn't just annoying, it's revealing, because a person who cannot own their past cannot be trusted with the future. If someone always needs to be seen as right, competent, or superior, it means their identity is brittle, and brittle identities are dangerous. They shatter easily and often take others down in the process. Another warning sign to watch for how they speak about others. Pay close attention. Do they gossip freely? Do they share stories that weren't theirs to tell? Do they enjoy the downfall of others just a little too much? These patterns are not harmless. They're symptoms of deeper corrosion. Envy, when it festers, leaks through language. It disguises itself as concern or honesty, but it carries a tone, a sharpness, a subtle delight in misfortune, a comparison that didn't need to be made. And the Stoic knows that this kind of speech is not just unwise, it's toxic. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." And that's more than a social strategy. It's a survival tactic, because words are powerful. They shape perception, they influence energy. And if you're constantly around someone whose language is laced with bitterness, comparison, or subtle sabotage, it begins to wear on you. It starts to color your own soul. The Stoic approach is not to react with judgment, but to observe with clarity and adjust with courage. You don't need to confront everyone, but you do need to be honest with yourself about what you're hearing. Ask yourself, when this person speaks, do I feel uplifted or drained, enlightened or confused? Is their story rooted in truth or dressed up in flattery and blame? Do they speak to grow or just to be admired? And don't forget to turn the same mirror inward. How do you speak about yourself? Are you always trying to sound more impressive, more put together, more ahead? Or can you admit when you're unsure, when you've failed, when you're still figuring things out? The more grounded you become, the less you'll need to prove. The more peace you carry within, the less you'll be tempted to broadcast false victories or hide behind excuses in daily life. This kind of awareness becomes a quiet superpower. In meetings, in friendships, in passing conversations, you begin to hear the undercurrent beneath the surface. And once you've trained your ear, it's impossible to ignore. You'll start noticing which people use language to connect and which use it to compete. You'll start filtering out the voices that seek to poison your perception. And most importantly, you'll strengthen your own ability to speak with intention, humility, and calm clarity. So let this be your guide when someone speaks about themselves. Listen when they speak about others. Listen closer, and when their words start to leave you confused, anxious, or diminished, don't argue, don't explain, just step back, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. You don't owe anyone access to your mind or your peace. And sometimes, the greatest act of Stoic strength is not saying anything at all, just recognizing the poison and refusing to drink it. In the end, your soul will become dyed with the words you absorb and the truths you embody. So choose wisely, listen deeply, and let only what is real shape who you are. Number 10. Listen to your inner voice. In a world overflowing with noise, opinions, expectations, charm, and deception, your most trustworthy guide is often the quietest one, your inner voice. What we call intuition is not magic. It's not irrational. It's the product of subtle wisdom that your conscious mind hasn't fully translated yet. Neuroscientists have shown that our gut feelings arise from the brain's extraordinary ability to rapidly scan for patterns, tone shifts, micro-expressions, contradictions, long before we consciously recognize them. And through the lens of Stoic philosophy, this inner awareness isn't just biology, it's a tool of perception, one that, if respected, can protect you from the kind of deception that smiles while it corrodes. Stoicism doesn't dismiss instinct, it refines it. It trains us not to act impulsively, but to listen attentively when something feels off. Because often, the earliest sign of envy or falsehood is not found in what someone says, but in what your body registers long before your mind has words for it. Have you ever been around someone who, on the surface, was nothing but pleasant? They spoke well of you, supported your work, seemed to be on your side, and yet, every time you interacted, you left the conversation feeling drained or on edge, like something invisible was pressing against your peace. No insults were made, no lines were crossed, but still, something was wrong. That discomfort, that quiet friction, it wasn't paranoia. It was your subconscious recognizing a crack between appearance and intention. Stoicism trains us to trust reality, not fantasy, not performance. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if someone is mistaken, instruct them kindly. But if they choose not to see, withdraw. He wasn't advocating for isolation. He was reminding us that truth is not just spoken, it's felt. And when someone's words say one thing, but your internal compass says otherwise, it's worth examining, not out of fear, not out of judgment, but out of respect for the harmony between your mind and your surroundings. People driven by jealousy or hidden motives rarely show their hand directly. They wear masks of support, of admiration, even of concern. But underneath, There's something off in the timing of their praise, in the sharpness of their compliments, in the way they always seem to one-up your story, redirect the spotlight, or remind you subtly of someone doing a little better. These signals are rarely loud. They show up in hesitation, in backhanded remarks, in vague emotional dissonance. And if you silence your inner voice to keep the peace, you will pay for it in fragments of your confidence. Let me share a story. Years ago, I was mentoring a young professional, let's call her Grace. She was bright, hard-working, and deeply committed to growth. One day, she shared with me how she had recently started doubting herself, feeling suddenly small in meetings, less confident in her contributions. When I asked what had changed, she mentioned a new colleague, outwardly warm, always smiling, constantly praising her work, but also consistently comparing her to others. "You remind me of Ava, she used to do things that way too. She didn't last long, but you've got potential," or "You're lucky to have gotten that client. Not everyone gets that kind of easy start." The comments weren't hostile. They were veiled in support. But Grace's gut knew something was wrong. Her inner voice was whispering, "This isn't encouragement, it's erosion." That moment of realization changed everything. She stopped trying to win the approval of someone who was never offering it sincerely, and more importantly, she started trusting the voice that had been right all along. Stoic philosophy empowers us to approach these moments with clarity. Not everything that makes us uncomfortable is toxic, but everything that's toxic will eventually make us uncomfortable. The key is not to overreact, but to stay observant. When your peace is consistently disrupted by someone's presence, even if they've done nothing wrong on the surface, ask deeper questions. Do their words align with their tone? Does their presence build you up or chip away at you? Slowly, subtly. Are you energized after spending time with them or exhausted? Second-guessing? Unsure? You don't need to confront them. You don't need to explain yourself. The Stoic path isn't to label everyone who unsettles us. It's to protect our peace by adjusting our boundaries. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. You can't control what others say, but you can choose how much space their energy takes up in your life. This also means giving yourself permission to exit relationships that look good on paper but feel misaligned in practice. Stoicism is not about enduring the intolerable in silence. It's about recognizing what disturbs your clarity and choosing serenity over superficial harmony. At the same time, the inner voice doesn't just detect others, it teaches you about yourself. If you ignore it repeatedly, you become deaf to its wisdom. But if you honor it, check it with reason, and allow it to guide your reflection, it becomes one of your sharpest tools. It won't always scream. Sometimes it will only hum, a soft discomfort, a quiet hesitance. But if you listen, really listen, you'll begin to see patterns sooner, recover your peace faster, and protect your energy more wisely. And let's be clear, this doesn't make you cold or suspicious. It makes you awake. It allows you to love with discernment, to support others without being exploited, to stay generous without being deceived. And in a world that often confuses kindness with weakness, this kind of internal strength is rare. But it is the mark of someone who lives by principle, not by popularity. So let this final lesson ring clear. Your intuition is not an inconvenience. It's a compass. Your discomfort around certain people is not always unjustified. It's often the earliest warning that something underneath the surface is misaligned. And if you listen closely, that voice, subtle, steady, often ignored, will guide you toward truth. Learn to listen not just to what is being said, but to what is being revealed. Between the lines, beneath the tone, beyond the words, because the soul doesn't lie, it signals, and the Stoic learns to hear what the world tries to hide. Let this be your practice. Honor the voice within. Stay grounded. Stay observant. And most importantly, stay free. So what did we uncover today? That envy doesn't always arrive with a scowl, and deception rarely announces itself with noise. Sometimes it greets you with a smile. Sometimes it hides behind praise, concern, or even friendship. But now you see more clearly. With the quiet strength of Stoic wisdom, you've sharpened your vision. You've learned how to spot what doesn't align, how to trust what your instincts whisper, and most importantly, how to protect your peace without raising your voice. Remember this: your energy is sacred. Don't spend it decoding people who secretly root against you. Surround yourself with those whose presence feels like calm, not competition. You don't need to argue, defend, or fight to keep your space. You only need to observe, gently, clearly, consistently. If this message resonated, take a moment to subscribe. Let this be the beginning of your practice, not just a passing insight. Share this with someone who could use a little clarity today. And when you're ready, try just one of the 10 tools we explored, then come back and comment, "Clear mind. You're stronger than you know, and your silence holds more power than noise ever will." Stay grounded, stay discerning, and in the next video, we'll go even